physical death is not the end, but rather a new beginning in an alternate realm where consciousness survives bodily death and interacts with deceased relatives, connections with supreme beings, feelings of love, peaceful coexistence and connectedness among beings that are come in contact with. So we're looking at two concepts here: near-death experiences, which science has not confirmed in terms of what it means, and consciousness, another term that is regarded as real, but we don't know where it is, why it exists, how it originates, yet scientists acknowledge again that consciousness exists everywhere.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
We're here with Bob Davis. He's a neuroscientist, former professor of sensory neuroscience at the State University of New York, and he just released The Consciousness Connection. It is both a book and a very amazing documentary. So let's talk with Bob. Hello, Bob. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing fine, AJ. Thank you for the invitation.
If you allow me to, we can include brief clips of your documentary during the interview.
Fine. You can do that? Sure.
Let's take a look at the first clip.
What is consciousness?
There is no consensus about what consciousness is or how to define it.
It's a mystery because we don't know what we're trying to explain.
Everything from people who say that it is a primary and fundamental force.
We don't have a definition of truly what consciousness is. Is it physical? If it is, Newtonian physics can't explain it.
Something that arises from the material world and is still material.
Is it also spiritual?
You have the whole gamut of ideas about it.
Our current concepts of the mind and the brain, which is basically that the mind is what the brain does, doesn't explain what's really going on with consciousness.
So in your book and documentary, The Consciousness Connection, you talk about near-death experiences. And you also mentioned that consciousness does not depend on the brain. And this would explain why people who have died continue having a consciousness. What can you dwell on NDE's consciousness and the survival of consciousness?
Well, that's an interesting question because it captures a lot of uncertainties in the sense that we don't really have a firm understanding about what consciousness really is. Is it an epiphenomenon of the brain or the other way around? Is the brain, mass and matter, derivatives of consciousness itself, which may be an external type of quantum energy that can survive bodily death? So materialist scientists will say that the brain generates the essence of you, what it feels like to be me. And once the hard drive crashes and the screen fades to black, that's the grand finale. It's dust to dust and ashes to ashes. Or, as many individuals who have a near-death experience contend, that it's not the end. Physical death is not the end, but rather a new beginning in an alternate realm where consciousness survives bodily death and interacts with deceased relatives, connections with supreme beings, feelings of love, peaceful coexistence and connectedness among beings that are come in contact with. So we're looking at two concepts here: near-death experiences, which science has not confirmed in terms of what it means, and consciousness, another term that is regarded as real, but we don't know where it is, why it exists, how it originates. Yet scientists acknowledge again that consciousness exists everywhere. To me, I believe that consciousness is primary. Mass, matter, and energy are all derivatives of consciousness. And that hard problem of consciousness, in terms of trying to define the essence of who we are, that hard problem, as it's called, is always going to be hard because it won't be found in the brain. The inner self could be forever beyond the reach of neuroscience to explain. But to me, consciousness is information exchange. We see it in near-death experiences where information is received in an alternate realm, again, from deceased relatives, supreme beings. But consciousness is the fabric of our universe. We're looking at anecdotal evidence, however, that confirms consciousness persists after bodily death. The essence of you, in other words, still exists even after bodily death. But we only have anecdotal, subjective evidence. And in a materialistic world that we live in, that doesn't cut it. We have to, scientists who conform to the materialist paradigm need to quantify information in a scientific manner in order to refute or support a hypothesis. But near-death experiences are just that, experiences that are highly subjective and cannot be measured quantitatively. Thus, materialists, scientists in general, do not believe that a near-death experience represents the separation of consciousness, the essence of you, from the body. They believe, again, that once the hard drive crashes, the screen fades to black, and that's all there is.
This is something from the documentary The Consciousness Connection, related to what he just said.
What we see overwhelmingly consistently in near-death experiences is consciousness, apart from the physical body, apart from any possible physical brain function. In that state, consciousness seems to be immaterial.
Some scientists propose that consciousness may emerge from another dimension.
Consciousness is quantum. Consciousness is a field.
Another hypothesis is to say that it's a multi-dimensional universe, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth dimension, and so forth. Consciousness and the mind reside in one of these higher dimensions that we can't access or can't measure.
When that consciousness is filtered into the brain in an animal living in this world, animal or human, then first and foremost, it's there to serve as something to help them be aware and protect themselves and survive.
In your book and in your documentary, you mentioned a term coined by Dr. Rhea White, a parapsychologist who in the 1980s introduced the term extraordinary human experiences. And this includes not only near-death experiences, but many phenomena that has been studied. So can you talk about what is an extraordinary human experiences and what are the different types?
The title of my book, synchronistically, is The Consciousness Connection: Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality. Extraordinary human experiences, there's over 100 of them. The main ones that are deriving the greatest attention from researchers involves mystical and psychic experiences highlighted in near-death and out-of-body states, extrasensory perception like telepathy, precognition, psychokinesis, Kundalini awakening or spiritual awakenings. Even effects from psychedelic substances generate extraordinary human experiences. These, in other words, these types of experiences, and there are certainly more, but these are just the main, more common ones. These experiences are extraordinary because they are simply that. They are so unusual relative to the normal daily life that people are changed. They undergo major transformations as a result of these experiences. Thus, I would consider it extraordinary. The experience itself is extraordinary, but even after the experience, that doesn't end right there. The experience was so atypical, awe-inspiring, unexplainable, that it leaves a major impression upon the individual, even after that experience goes away. Many people, for instance, who have a near-death experience have major after effects, and they're transformed philosophically, psychologically, for the rest of their lives. It's not uncommon for people to have these extraordinary human experiences and then enter different fields of occupation simply because they realize that connection with people, love, humaneness, sympathy, and empathy, all these kinds of qualities are essential, and they want to serve humankind in as meaningful a way as possible. It thus often results in many people leaving their jobs that they're unsatisfied with and entering a different profession that again helps society and people in general overall. So there's no one definition of extraordinary human experiences. What some may find extraordinary, others may not. But when we talk about the types of experiences in my film, The Conscious Connection, and book, also by the same name, we're talking about at least 6 to 7 major types of extraordinary experiences, as I mentioned earlier.
Right. I think Rhea White defined them as transformative events that shift personal consciousness. There's one thing that I want to ask you. You mentioned in your book that these experiences tend to disrupt the person's worldview. And as I have found after interviewing over 100 near death experiencers, many come back not only with a new challenge, but they come back with certain trauma. They are not understood by their peers. They are sometimes they don't share their stories openly. They have the divorce rate among NDEers is very high, and some just want to die and they just want to go back. So, to what degree do you think that these extraordinary human experiences, including NDEs, disrupt a person's previous worldview, and how does this affect the person?
It affects people in a variety of different ways, often dictated by the personality of that individual and the type of experience that they had and how powerful an experience that it was. But after these experiences, people often realize that it is highly disruptive. You mentioned divorce rate. You're right. People who have near-death experiences, 70% have a divorce within 7 years, which is far greater than the average percent among the United States population, at least. People have major questions. What happened to me? Why did I have this experience? Why did I see deceased relatives and a deity? What is this all about? Why am I reading somebody else's mind? Why am I leaving my body and perceiving it from a different vantage point? People question these types of experiences because they don't have answers to them, and they're anxious to find the answers and are inhibited in doing so because of the negative stigma often associated with these kinds of experiences. They don't openly talk to people about it, so they often hold it inside and do their own personal research, trying to figure out, why me? What does it mean? Why did I have this experience? What do I do with it? Who do I tell? So it's often anxiety provoking, which can, of course, lead to depression. And many people who may not be, let's say, stable emotionally, can have serious psychological effects from these kinds of experiences. We can't say that everybody is going to benefit tremendously from these experiences, even though it sounds certainly pleasant, going to an alternate realm during a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, and feeling intense love, and for the most part, it is a positive experience in general for the majority of people. These extraordinary experiences in the long term are positive. In the short term, however, they are generally very anxiety producing.
This is another interesting clip from Bob's new documentary.
Today, almost everybody knows what ESP means, but it includes telepathy, meaning mind-to-mind communication. It includes clairvoyance, meaning my mind can pick up information that's in nobody else's mind, that might be sealed inside of a computer or inside of an envelope or deep under the earth. There's precognition, looking into the future, and retrocognition, looking into the past. In 2018, the flagship journal of the American Psychological Association, an organization that has not been friendly to parapsychology, published an article by Edsel Cardania, a parapsychologist working in Sweden, summarizing the results of, I think, approximately 1,400 experiments in parapsychology, and determining that they were overwhelmingly statistically significant. As the experimental conditions got tighter and tighter, the results remained strong.
In your documentary, you talk about Charles Tart, and he conducted a series of experiments to prove that out-of-body experiences were real. And he had a few verified cases. And to what degree out-of-body experiences, which are also part of a high number of NDEs, have been proven by science, by these experiments?
How do you prove out-of-body experiences?
Well, Charles Tart conducted an experiment with a number. Can you mention that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Charles Tart, psychologist and studied parapsychology, he had a subject who had an out-of-body. He did research with a subject. He placed a 5-digit number a long distance away from a subject, thereby blinding the subject to that 5-digit number. Didn't know what it was, yet she was able to but through an out-of-body experience, she was able to correctly mention the 5 digits. And the odds of getting those 5 digits correct were 1 in 100,000. So he conducted experiments like this and revealed some extraordinary results in the out-of-body state, just like Bob Monroe did, who founded, I guess you can say, out-of-body experiences through his hemisync sound technology.
This is something from Bob's documentary, The Consciousness Connection.
Charles Tart did some work in the 1960s with someone going out of body to kind of levitate up. Look, if they're looking down on their body, can they look down on a shelf that's above there too? And was able to, one of the folks was able to do some description of some numbers that were actually there.
Tart was researching this mystery at the University of Virginia Sleep Lab, one of the few scientists willing to stand up against the rigid academic stigma and materialism of the day.
Understanding psi and beginning to fit it in with the other things that we know will mean we'll have a greatly expanded and more effective understanding of the ordinary physical universe.
In your documentary, you feature Monroe's history, how he started out, and what the scientific studies he carried out. So could you mention what his major achievements were?
Bob Monroe was a broadcaster in the 40s and 50s, and he was into radio from a business level as well as a personal level. He actually was involved in some TV shows and radio broadcasts, but he was started to experiment with sound, trying to use sound to help people fall asleep. Bob Monroe worked with two researchers using modified sound technology, where he would introduce binaural beats, which means you're going to get a wah, 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 wah kind of sound. When you put two pure tones in each ear that differ by a few hertz frequency signals, the brain actually generates a third sound that has that wah, 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 wah kind of beat in it. And he experimented with it to the point where his two researchers had out-of-body experiences, and they claimed to have met each other in an out-of-body state. And they refined the sound technology, and it got it patented by the U.S. government. And he founded the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. And now, since his founding of the institute, over 30,000 or so people have gone through the Monroe Institute to learn about this sound technology and experience it, possibly to go out of body. But about 10% of people who go there have an out of body experience. But they're taught how to evolve their abilities to the point where you can generate your own personal out of body experience, which can initially be very frightening, of course. But he was successful enough to stimulate the interest of the public at large and many researchers who went there to continue research in the area of out-of-body experiences. Bob Monroe himself had many out-of-body experiences. In fact, he claimed to have contact with alternate realms, and he would take write meticulous details of information about the different realms of reality that he would visit, with different beings in each one. So he was convinced that the out-of-body experience is real, and he can actually produce it in many people, as many people claim, but it's not guaranteed. But I would recommend people to look at the Monroe Institute, and we did include it in our film, The Consciousness Connection, which, by the way, is on Amazon Video or GAIA.com. People can view the film by going there.
I have found that many people who have had a near-death experience develop other types of extraordinary human experiences, like telepathy. Some of them claim to have had a Kundalini awakening. They have precognitive experiences. They start seeing dead people. You mentioned the apparitional experiences. And they also have mystical experiences. Have you found that near-death experiencers often develop these?
Oh, yes, indeed. It's an excellent question, AJ. For some reason, many, and I don't know what percent, I've never seen a percent percentage value given to the number of percent of individuals who have a near-death experience do report to develop ESP, as you mentioned, telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and it's not that uncommon. Just by talking to people, I get the sense that it's more common than not. People think they can read other people's minds. They just become much more connected to some aspect of reality that they weren't connected with before their NDE. I'm at a loss to come up with any reasonable answer why this is the case, other than the fact that it is true. So people are not only changed philosophically, psychologically, emotionally, but also in terms of these psychic kinds of skills that they seem to develop.
So my next question is regarding a field that is really interesting. I'd like to talk about remote viewing and the Stargate program, because the Stargate program was conducted by the government, and it more or less proved that remote viewing was accurate. And you also feature in your movie Joe McMoneagle. He was one of the main pioneers in remote viewing. So what can you tell us about remote viewing, and what does it prove regarding consciousness?
Remote viewing is a unique skill. Maybe the best way to define it is by an example. Let's just say while I'm sitting here, if I was able to remote view something successfully, I would be able to sense, visualize in my mind. I would receive information. I would establish some kind of connection between what I'm perceiving and something that is far away, out of my sensory capabilities. Joe McMoneagle, for instance, from his office in the Pentagon, was able to remote view and reveal the specific characteristics of a secret Soviet submarine that was being built at the time. So I once said to Joe McMoneagle, is it like going out of body, from your office in the Pentagon? Are you going to Russia or the Soviet Union to see the submarine during Project Stargate, as you mentioned? And he said, and he didn't think it was an out-of-body experience. He says, no, it's just a unique skill of a person, but you don't have an out-of-body state. You would think, however, that you would need that to leave the body, go remote, interact with whatever it might be, a submarine or a person far removed from your visual field, and accurately identify it. People who remote view do this, and the US, along with the Soviet Union, developed these sophisticated techniques of remote viewing during the Cold War of the 1970s, 1980s. In fact, the CIA required their personnel who was being trained in remote viewing to go to the Monroe Institute to learn how to go out of body. That was a requirement. And I have no doubt that remote viewing works. It's probably a form of extrasensory perception of some type, but it's uniquely different than ESP or telepathy or clairvoyance, and it's not an out-of-body experience. But it's its own unique, extraordinary human experience. That's another one. But Project Stargate was, a secret spy war between the United States and the Soviet Union, involving, among other things, remote viewing. And it's probably going on today, only much more sophisticated. I can't even imagine the types of instrumentation that's being used, or technology that's being used, and in the possible collection of information far removed from the individual.
Okay, here's another interesting clip.
According to declassified documents, the U.S. government began secretly studying remote viewing in the early 1970s. The Department of Defense contracted scientists and remote viewers at the Stanford Research Institute. After some reported success, the Defense Intelligence Agency began Project Grill Flame. In 1991, the name changed to Project Stargate.
When they came up with this idea that they had to address psychic functioning because the Russians were known to be using it. I didn't know what remote viewing was, so they said, well, how'd you like to do one? I said, sure. So I did 6 of them. And it turned out I had 5 first-place matches and 1 very near.
Another thing that near-death experiencers report is a sense of unity or oneness. You talk about this in your book. You define it as mystical experiences. And you say that these involve direct contact with a perceived higher reality or universal unity. So have you found that these can be produced other than in near-death experiences?
You mean interconnectedness?
Let me rephrase that question. Mystical experiences can be experienced by someone who has not had a near-death experience, right?
Right.
And can you mention some cases that you've studied? Or what can you tell us about this human experience, this type?
Near-death experience?
No. The mystical experiences you mentioned, a contact with the ineffable that is described as a union with oneness. They link it with the whole universe.
Yeah. Well, I can say that just based on my own personal observations and discussions with people who have extraordinary experiences, they contend that there is this interconnectedness, this oneness. When people have near-death experiences, they sense this oneness, this interconnectedness. It's even addressed in quantum mechanics. But maybe the best way to answer it is from my own personal experience. I had a Kundalini awakening, a spiritual experience, and I felt that level of interconnectedness with everything and everyone, to the point where after my Kundalini awakening, and I encourage people to read about it if they're unfamiliar with Kundalini, because take my word for it, it is real. As remarkable an experience as it is valid and should not be disputed. But following that, I became a tree hugger. You talk about interconnectedness. I hugged trees. I just felt a need to do that. Now, there's a lot more to my story of the Kundalini awakening, but that's not the topic of conversation. But it's an extraordinary human experience, very different than a near-death out-of-body experience. But one of the symptoms associated with that is that sense of oneness. And you hear that a lot in mystical experiences, that interconnectedness with the universe. We're all one. And that's true. That is true. It seems to be a natural outgrowth of extraordinary human experiences, this interconnectedness, which should be the case among individuals on a routine basis, where we're all one. Our consciousness, in other words, is one of the same. We share consciousness. In fact, people who are remarkably close to one another. Their brain frequencies actually are the same. When you measure their EEG, especially between romantic partners or good friends, their brain waves are so similar, it's like one brain with two people. In other words, you could share your brain with another, and you can influence a person deeply to the point where their brain coincides with yours. Now, that's a type of interconnectedness for sure, but it's at a level of physicalness where the brainwave frequencies are similar, so we interconnect physically, but there's also a spiritual interconnectedness. When I'm hugging the tree, that's spiritual. I just feel a need to express my love and my appreciation for nature, and that's what led me to hug the tree. But that was again precipitated by my Kundalini awakening, which has transformed me in many ways over time. Initially, it was anxiety producing, but in the long term, I like to think it had positive effects.
Let's take a look at another clip from the consciousness connection.
Holding that awareness allows us to access information and energy from beyond our conventional notions of time and space, which in turn can amplify innovation, well-being, and transformation.
We become kinder, more wise human beings because we see our interconnection with the world around us and the people around us, and we suddenly feel a responsibility to those people and to the planet.
That is the deepest and most profound effect of this awakening in the scientific world to the primacy of consciousness. That's where that will have a tremendous benefit to all of humankind, because it will wake us from the terrible slumber of materialist false assumptions and the bleak and paltry fiction of materialism that our existence is birth to death and nothing more. And the sooner we eradicate that simplistic and false materialist narrative, the sooner we can all take responsibility and better stewardship of this planet for our own lives, the lives of those we love, and the lives of all of our fellow beings.
I would like to ask you about your own Kundalini awakening. Who were you? What was going on? When did this happen? Can you talk about this, please?
I gave a lecture in Australia, and after the lecture, some people came up to me and invited me for wine and cheese in a hotel that I was staying at. So I attended, and there was a woman there who said, "I'd like to do healing." Everybody sat around in a circle, and she starts talking. She's saying things like, you need to remove your negative engrams from your body organs. You need to have positive energy. She kept talking about removing negative stuff and positive stuff. I started coughing and I couldn't stop. But I felt bliss. I felt wonderful. Something was affecting me. Not the words that she said, but probably more the intention behind it. But I was so moved by that incident of my coughing and feeling bliss. I said, meet me in my room tomorrow and let's do this again. We did. She started talking again. She's sitting a few feet in front of me, and my body starts gyrating, and my head starts tilting extreme to the right as far as it can go. My mouth deviated, on its own. I'm not doing this. This is what's unusual. My body is acting independent of conscious thought. So I'm shaking. My body's quivering. My breathing is irregular. I'm jumping up and down like this. My head is down. I'm bobbing up and down. And if you were to look at me, you would think that I was in great pain or crying. That's a normal reaction if you would have seen me. But that's wasn't the case at all. I was feeling nothing but bliss throughout that whole thing. And I was in a dualistic state apart from my body, in a sense. My body was modifying itself without my involvement. It's like I'm watching my body gyrate and I couldn't stop it. And I felt tremendous bliss, great energy. And the Kundalini awakening is like an energetic awakening. But it was so stimulating. I kept on doing this. Give me more. Give me more, I would say to her. Whatever she was doing, she was, in a sense, channeling, I think, channeling energy from somewhere, somebody, into me. And then after that happens, took about a half hour, we smelled sulfur in the room. And I read that that's a good thing, indicating you got rid of negative energy. I don't know how true that is. But for many months, though, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety because, like most people, it would be natural to say, "What happened? What did I go through? What does it mean? What do I need to do?" But these are such pronounced questions that are deep in nature, that you think you need. You have, well, it causes a lot of anxiety. I was in a very anxious state for many months, and I didn't want to go to a psychiatrist for medication because I was afraid they would say I'm psychotic or something like that. You know, you can't explain the situation. You don't know how it's going to be interpreted given the negative stigma we live in. But everybody should have one. You remove part of your ego after these spiritual awakenings, and there are many different kinds. The Kundalini is just one kind. There are others, but aside from that sense of oneness and bliss, I was in great need. I needed help that I didn't receive. I purposely didn't seek medical attention. Eventually, the anxiety dissipated and things were fine. But it caused me to be more spiritual. My ego was reduced to the point where I wasn't the center of the universe anymore. And that I know is a fact. You know, we all have ego. You need the ego. It's very important, but too much of an ego can be detrimental. You're not the center of the universe. You revolve around the center after these kinds of experiences when your ego is reduced. And as far as I'm concerned, the ego is what's wrong with humanity because of power, fear, and greed that is often associated with the human ego.
So you actually experienced a transformation. So who were you before this experience? Were you a person interested in spirituality? And how was your transformation? Who are you now?
I wasn't very spiritual. You know, I was involved in doing scientific research for over 3 decades. So I followed the scientific method, and that is not spiritual. I did, however, have a great interest in UFOs. I always found that to be a fascinating topic, another type of extraordinary human experience that's in my book. I address interactions with non-human entities. I am, without question, much more spiritual. I wouldn't be talking to you now if I didn't have a Kundalini awakening. I know that. I would never have written books on UFOs and the latest one, The Consciousness Connection. I've written others, Life After Death, and analysis of the evidence. I get into topic areas that are inconsistent with what I studied for decades. I just completely transversed my interests and writings from science to more spiritual matter. But there's science in the spirituality. There's science to end near-death experiences and Kundalini. We just don't have the actual principles, the scientific theories that can explain these extraordinary events. But oh my gosh, I would never have done the documentary, The Consciousness Connection, if I didn't have a Kundalini. You see, it's all my post-retirement years were highly dissimilar from when I was working in a materialistic scientific mindset. You know, what you see is what you get kind of mentality, but that's not the case. And I am now advocating for a paradigm shift away from materialism to embrace something like idealism, where again, mass, matter, and energy are derivatives of consciousness. Consciousness again is fundamental. Without consciousness, there would not be existence, of course. But we're not talking about a body consciousness. We're talking about an external energy, possibly of a quantum-like energy that represents one's consciousness. And it's all interrelated with energies of everyone that becomes real to the person once they leave their body. So they contend.
After doing research for so many years, what are your thoughts on life after death? You have also written about this, right?
Yeah, I wrote the book, Life After Death, Analysis of the Evidence. I always thought it was a coin flip, 50-50, whether or not you live beyond. After getting into all this research, after writing my books, I would say that it's a 90% chance that we do persist, if not higher. My reservation for not saying 100 is because of that materialist mindset that I used to have. I need to see the data. I need to see the hard evidence. Well, we don't have that hard evidence in near-death experiences. Again, it's always anecdotal. Even though vertical perceptions are quite astonishing, these experiences are highly valid subjectively, but it still is not persuasive enough for the scientific community to embrace it wholeheartedly and adopt it as fact. I couldn't be more spiritual than I already am. I even have a Facebook page that I administer called the Consciousness Connection Group. I encourage people to look at that, the Consciousness Connection Group, and I post every day. Few things. I put posts of your shows, AJ, on there, and there are many likes that it generates. It's hard to find good shows in the area of NDE, ESP, extraordinary human events, etc. But yours is certainly one of the few that I regard as extremely popular, and you have excellent guests, and you do a great job moderating and asking questions. So yeah, I've changed in this past decade. I've changed greatly. I'm 72 now. It's getting late in life, and the concept of death obviously becomes more meaningful. You're more mindful of that concept. Not surprisingly, I have to look at the research evidence in near-death experiences above all else to help me convince me that there is an afterlife. And there are people who have, when people have NDEs, they are convinced there's an afterlife. There's been studies done that show death anxiety is 0% in people who have NDEs. They completely lose their fear of death, if they had one prior to it. And belief in an afterlife, where before the NDE, it could be 20, 30% believed in an afterlife. After the NDE, that jumps up to 70, 80%. That's how persuasive an NDE is. So there is data, but again, there is some data on near-death experiences, but how do you measure someone recalling information that doctors the procedures doctors may be performing on you when you're totally unconscious in a surgical suite, recalling conversation that happened, a long distance away, and recalling it accurately. While again, the EEG is completely flat. The person is clinically dead, eventually is revived, and then shares information only to be told that it's real, valid, accurate, a veridical perception. And we have many cases of veridical perceptions that more than anything has convinced me that there's life after death. I'll tell you a brief story. There was it's a true story. A person named Jack, he was hospitalized because of a respiratory problem, and his nurse Anita told Jack that she's going to take the weekend off, and that this other nurse, who she introduced to Jack, was going to take over for her, and that she'll see him on Monday. While Anita was away, Jack had a respiratory event. He had asthma, and had a flat EEG. He had a near-death experience during that period of unconsciousness. While in a beautiful pastoral garden, he's suddenly surprised when he sees Anita, his nurse, approach him. And Anita says to him, "Jack, I want you to go to my parents and tell them that I love them very much and that I am sorry that I wrecked their red MGB." And this was back in the 1970s, where there were very few MGBs, let alone red ones, running around. When Jack awoke, he told the first nurse about his near-death experience, and that nurse started to cry, and she left the room. Jack later found out that Anita took that weekend off to celebrate her 21st birthday and was given a red MGB car by her parents. She was so excited, she took it out for a test drive, and she crashed it in a tree, was killed instantly. At the same time, Jack had his NDE. Now, this story was thoroughly researched and verified by the others who were in the hospital at the time and who knew Jack and Anita. But so not only did Jack know that she died, how could he know? But he also knew how she died, let alone that she did die. It's impossible that he could have known this. But don't you see, we have many cases like this, not exactly like a red MGB, but many veridical perceptions, verifiable, in other words, perceptions that occur during NDEs that you can't quantify. You can't. You have to qualitatively, you have to look at the information and accept it as real, as valid. But science doesn't do that. That's the problem. That's what frustrates me greatly. And that's why our film, The Consciousness Connection, on Amazon Video, addresses the need for a paradigm shift away from this materialistic mindset of quantifying all the data to verify truth, to merge, to accept, to recognize more seriously the qualitative, subjective nature of events as being as important as quantitative events, and integrating both the quantitative and the qualitative to prove or disprove a theory. Now, when I hear the story of the red MGB, which was told to me by Bruce Grayson, a leading NDE researcher and psychiatrist, that will be in our next documentary on NDEs. When you hear stories like this, isn't it wrong to not believe that it could be possible? It's beyond belief. There's a book that Simon Bown wrote on about 30 cases of vertical perceptions. That would be a very interesting book to read. I would like to get my hands on that someday.
I wrote the foreword of Simon Bown's book. Yeah, I know it very well. I was one of the first to read it. I also worked on the layout and proofreading. So how can people watch your documentary, and where can they get your book?
The documentary, The Consciousness Connection, is on Amazon Video or GAIA.com, GAIA.com. And my book is also on Amazon, The Consciousness Connection, Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality. My website is bobdavisspeaks.com, where you have more information about the film and my books.
Researchers have amassed compelling evidence that consciousness may extend beyond the confines of our physical brains. Is this the next frontier in the consciousness connection?
We've had this idea for thousands of years that the brain creates all our thoughts and feelings and memories. But in all that time, we have absolutely no idea how it could do that.
Do we stand at the brink of a new awakening of human enlightenment? A paradigm shift that not only promises to revolutionize our understanding of science and the cosmos, but also has the potential to transform our collective understanding of ourselves.
Hi, I'm Janet Riley, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And I am thrilled to invite you to join us at our annual conference, August 27th to the 31st in Oak Brook, Illinois, just outside Chicago, where we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the field of near-death studies. Join us for 4 inspiring days with more than 100 speakers, including the legendary Life After Life author Raymond Moody, University of Virginia Professor Emeritus Dr. Bruce Grayson, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell of the Telepathy Tapes, the psychic lawyer Mark Anthony, and spiritual teacher Carolyn Mace, among others. You'll experience healing workshops, including meditation, Reiki, spiritual counseling, and our beloved bookstore with exclusive book signings, surrounded by others who share your interests and your experiences. Come make friends and become part of a warm, caring community that will beckon you to return. Every year, we welcome nearly 1,000 attendees and serve over 20,000 globally through educational resources and support groups. This warm, deeply connected community celebrates life and the life that follows. For nearly 50 years, IANS has represented researchers who study near-death experiences and supported those who have had near-death experiences and experienced related phenomena. Our mission is to educate the world. Our hope is that by supporting research and people, and by communicating far and wide to reporters, podcasters, and through our website and social media, we can normalize discussions about death and the afterlife and help answer the very important question: what happens when we die? Our planet faces unprecedented challenges, and our conference offers a place to recharge, to be informed, to be healed and inspired. Register now at iands.org, that's IANDS.org, and become part of a gathering that informs, heals, and inspires. We hope to see you there.
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.